I've had so much fun making these animated shorts based on Bible stories. And today we're diving into the book of Esther with a queen's big secret, a deadly plot, and the courage to change everything. This is the story of Esther. So back in the olden times, way before Jesus came, there were these kingdoms. You know, the big wigs and the fancy palaces. Well, there was this one kingdom called Persia, which was huge, and nestled in the heart of it was this city called Susa. Now, Susa was like the capital, real fancy. And in this city lived a Jewish woman named Esther. Her folks had moved to this place long ago, but she was living with her cousin Mordecai since her parents had passed away. And this Mordecai guy, he was kind of like a dad to her. Anyway, one day this mega important guy named King Xerxes throws a huge party. All the nobles are there. Like, imagine the fanciest party you've ever seen. But here's the twist. They're trying to find a new queen. And guess who catches the king's eye? Yep, Esther. That's her. So the king's like, "You're my new queen." Everyone cheers. But Esther doesn't spill the beans that she's Jewish. Not yet anyway. Instead, she tells the king she's just an ordinary Persian. Why? Well, you'll see why later. Meanwhile, this other dude named Haman, he's all about climbing the social ladder. And when he finds out Mordecai won't bow down to him, he gets super pissed. To make things worse, when Haman goes to complain to the king is wearing this ring made by a Jew, adding fuel to the fire. So now Haman wants to wipe out everyone who's Jewish, not just Mordecai. He convinces the king to sign this decree allowing anyone to kill any Jew. The next day, messengers ride off to every corner of the empire delivering these scrolls with the king's stamp, basically giving people permission to attack Jews. And nobody can go against the king's order, not even the queen. When Mordecai hears about the plan, he rips his clothes and puts on sackcloth and ashes. Sitting outside the palace gates waiting for rescue, he sends a message to Esther saying, "Don't stay silent, girl. Save our peeps. I don't know if you were picked for such a time as this." She realizes he's right. People are gonna die because of this. So Esther gathers her gal pals, eunuchs and maids, and they join Mordecai in fasting for 3 days. No food or water. And she tells her friend Hagedon to get the king's guys to come over for dinner twice. That's a double date. On the first night, Esther plays it cool, smiling and mingling. But it's only a setup. She needs more time. Now, while Esther's throwing this fancy bash, Haman's got this massive gallows built outside the city walls. It's tall and strong. He plans to invite the king and hang Mordecai on it. But Mordecai's not going anywhere. And secretly, Esther has alerted the king's officer to spy on Haman. On the second night, the king's like, "Oh, where's the booze?" Normally, there's this giant stack of wine, but someone has cleaned house. And check this out. The queen hasn't even touched it. Now, some side characters are pointing fingers, but Esther's not having it. She reveals Haman's evil scheme, telling the king, this nasty Haman is behind it all. When the king realizes he's been tricked, he's furious. Meanwhile, Haman is freaking out, sliding around the floor in panic. He begs for mercy, but the king just says, "Get this guy out of here." Haman's like, okay, and heads for the exit. But those same guards who just grabbed him turn around and grab him again. They drag him to the gallows he built himself. Ironically, Haman's plan was to hang Mordecai, but now he's the one on the hay, folks. Welcome to my channel, and now let's dive into our second episode, Esther, for such a time as this. Okay, so since we had some big action beats and transitions in episode 1, this one will probably be a bit more internal. Our goal will be to use visual metaphors and striking compositions to mirror Esther's thoughts. and decisions. We also want to make sure that the look of the series remains consistent. That means sticking to the same aspect ratio, color palettes, font choices, etc. In other words, the overall experience feels like a series. Let's start with the cold open, which will hook us into the core dilemma of the film. We fade in on a flickering candle in a dark palace corridor. This will lead us to quick cuts, a sealed scroll, a signet ring, and a door guarded by spearmen. Then we pause on a close-up of the queen's face as she addresses the camera directly. Now, when it comes to the main titles, I would usually recommend avoiding on-screen text during this section. That said, I do think this quick sound logo gives us a sense of the scope and texture of the world. So it's a good call here. After all, the series is called Esther. In this telling, the story unfolds into acts separated by a twist of fate. In Act 1, we meet Esther living in exile in the Persian Empire, having lost her parents at a young age. She's raised by her cousin Mordecai. We watch as she grows into a beautiful young woman and eventually catches the eye of King Xerxes, who makes her queen. All the while, Mordecai warns her to keep their Jewish heritage secret. Meanwhile, a royal official named Haman gains power and becomes bitter that Mordecai won't bow down to him. In Act 2, Haman convinces the king to issue a death warrant for all the Jews in the empire. Mordecai tells Esther she must convince the king to reverse the decree. Although she fears for her life, Esther agrees. She calls for a fast among her people and summons the king and Haman to a banquet. There, she reveals Haman's evil plot. The king is furious and reverses the decree. Then, as a final act of revenge, she has Haman hanged on the gallows he built to hang Mordecai. So let's jump back into the story. We see a wide drone-like shot of a grand citadel. We're immediately struck by its size and splendor, hinting at both the scope of the story and the grandeur of the Persian Empire. To set the stage for the story, we follow a young Jewish woman named Esther through a soft montage. She walks among the humble homes of her community, where she's loved and respected. Soon, however, a procession arrives, and Esther is escorted through massive gates and into the heart of the palace. There, she's made queen, marking a significant change in her life. Along the way, we're introduced to several important characters, including her uncle, Mordecai, and the villain of the story, Haman. We see Haman rise in power, becoming increasingly prideful and vindictive. As he passes Mordecai, he demands that he bow down, but Mordecai refuses. This sparks Haman's rage, and he vows revenge. We see Haman devise a plan with his wife and friends. They decide that the best way to hurt Mordecai is to get rid of every Jew in the empire. Haman goes to the king and asks for permission to destroy them. The king agrees, and Haman seals the decree with the royal signet ring. At this point, the tone shifts as we realize the magnitude of what's happening. The messengers leave on horseback to deliver the decree. The camera follows them until they reach the city where Mordecai lives. Now, we haven't seen Esther yet, but we hear her voice over this montage, telling us how she concealed her identity as a Jew and why it's so important. Her perspective gives us insight into her internal conflict as she tries to figure out what to do about the impending disaster. Back in the palace, we see Haman holding court, showing off his wealth and power to the visiting dignitaries. He brags about his honors and how he tricked the king into giving him the royal signet.